Welcome back. You are listening to another edition of Blewetts Blitz. Sorry, it's been about 3 weeks since I've been on. A little bit busy, a little bit busy with some of the draft film, a little bit busy with some of the Jets film. Sold my house, going through inspections, going through attorney review, going all that stuff, and bought a new one. So I've been stupidly busy the last couple of weeks, just trying to prep some stuff, and then also obviously getting my house in order and getting everything in order for the new house. But been plenty busy, but have a ton of reviews prepped, have a ton of kind of thoughts on the draft class a little bit, what the Jets should do or shouldn't do. We've had a ton go on, obviously, the last few weeks, whether it be rumors about quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers to the Giants, Aaron Rodgers to the Vikings, which doesn't really matter for the Jets, but it's somewhat topical, obviously. We have Fields rumors. We have draft rumors. The Jets trying to trade up to 1. Do they do that for Cam Ward? Do they wait and see if he slips and trade up to 3 or 4, something like that? Do they draft Shedeur Sanders if he's there at 7? That's a big question. A lot of people will say, like, hey, the next year's draft is better. And that's what we kind of always hear. And obviously there are drafts where they're terrible years. You know, look at the Daniel Jones draft. I think that was Daniel Jones and maybe Dwayne Haskins. Maybe I'm misremembering, but not a great draft class. But nonetheless, like, you look at what this year was supposed to be with Beck, with Drew Lar, with Quinn Ewers. All those guys were supposed to be first-round draft picks. And if you're talking to me in 2020, 3 or 4 last year and said, "Oh, we'll wait until next year's draft. Carson Beck's going to be there. Drew Lar is going to be there. Quinn Ewers is definitely a top 10 pick." And now they're not. So like it could happen next year as well. Now, if the Jets have if they like one of these quarterbacks and they have conviction in one of them, I'm okay with them going to get them. I don't want them to do it just to do it, and that's quite an obvious statement. But don't rush it if you don't need to. But listen, at the same point, if they like Cam Ward enough where they think he can absolutely be a franchise guy and they have a plan for him, and they gave up 2 1s, a 2 and a 3 to go get him, would I necessarily endorse it? I'm not sure. I wouldn't be mad at it though if they have conviction in their guy. If they don't have conviction in one of these guys and they're lukewarm on them, then okay, just be prepared and kind of allow yourself maneuverability in the future to trade up. I would say to not trade a ton of assets or anything like that. Don't trade 4th round picks, 5th round picks for players, because next year you're going to have to trade up into the top 10, top 5 to get a quarterback, which is not always guaranteed, right? Like we could say, yeah, there's going to be 4 really good quarterbacks next year. What happens if teams 1, 2, 3, and 4 all need quarterbacks? The Jets are not trading up. Now, with that being said, is that likely where they couldn't get up if they wanted to? Probably not. But obviously there's some volatility with the class and how good it's going to be. And then some volatility with, who they could trade up with to get said picks. Because what if, teams 1, 2, and 4 need one, but the Patriots are 3? They're not trading with us, so kind of depends. But, interesting, obviously, to see what's going to happen. I'm more of the I'm okay with whatever they. I'm not okay with whatever they do, but I'm going to say this year I don't want to go into the year with Tyrod Taylor and Kirk Cousins. I want some hope of upside. So I know people don't want Fields. To me, if you're not going to get a quarterback in the draft, then I would get Fields. If it's not a guy in the 1st or 2nd round, I'm okay with Fields' upside. You bring him in and you try to see, you try to ride it out for a year and see if you have anything. And then past that, if it was just Tyrod and Kirk Cousins, it'd be pretty uninspiring. So I would want at least Tyrod and a 2nd round rookie, 3rd round rookie. But as long as you bring in a guy in the 2nd, 3rd round and or bring in Fields, I'm okay with it. I just want some semblance of, okay, maybe something can work out. But obviously, if Fields comes in this year, most likely it's not going to necessarily work out, and you'll probably have to trade up. But again, make sure you allocate the resources to not. But so the last 3 weeks, there's been a lot going on. I'll be transparent. I'm going to rely on the chat to kind of refresh my memory with a lot of stuff. I know Garrett Wilson, there's some rumors by, I'm sure, some bullshit website that he is looking for about $30 million a year. I'm sure there's a website I can go to in terms of the averages per year for receivers. The thing I could say with that is I think Garrett Wilson has the talent to be a top 10 receiver. I'll say it again. I think Garrett Wilson has the talent to be a top 10 receiver. Is Garrett Wilson a top 10 receiver in the NFL right now? However you may want to quantify that, by statistically, obviously not. Is he though? I would say no. I would say he's more in that 10 to 20 range. There are some things he needs to do better. One of the concerns I had with him coming out of Ohio State was his releases. He still struggles with his releases at sometimes. Don't send me the Cleveland fade clip in his rookie year and say, oh, struggles with releases. Look at this. Like, obviously there's some good ones. It's just inconsistent. His contested catching has been, I would say, average, if average. Winning vertically is a problem for Garrett Wilson. You don't see him win a ton vertically. And then just really two other smaller complaints, and these are smaller. They're ticky-tacky, but still you want to see him fixed eventually. He's got to catch with his hands more. He tends to not attack a ball, and he jumps up into a ball and doesn't catch it with his hands, which can lead to some drops. And he's got to get, in my opinion, he's got to get north and south, more so east and west. He dances a little bit too much with Yak, but I think he has a ton of talent. And people will say, oh, well, and this is the Twitter arguments. And this is why I don't go on Twitter a ton, because you're not really going to have like you can't really argue a lot on Twitter. I don't have that many minutes or hours to argue with people. But nonetheless, people be like, oh, well, how could you know that with his, he's with these quarterbacks and these are his stats. I'm like, there's ways to evaluate receivers, obviously outside of stats. So I'm not just watching Garrett Wilson and say, oh, well, when does he get the ball? Like, those are plays I'm going to watch, or those are the plays that most people watch are the targets. You guys know that if you've been here for a while, I watch every single rep of their season. It's not just targets. So when I say that Garrett Wilson, I think he'd get better, it's not from me just looking up, 1,100 yards. Oh, well, his quarterback sucked. Okay. Like, if he's burning people consistently, he's not getting the ball, then it's different. And it's not to say he doesn't at times, but I think he's more in the 15 to 20 range, 10 to 20 range. Trying to get paid like a top 10 guy. Would I do it? Yeah, still probably would. I think he only gets better. He has some pretty rare explosion type traits, so I would do it. But for the Jets fans out there, like, oh, he's automatic, he's already a top 10 guy. That's obviously you're looking at him with some green goggles, because he undoubtedly has things to improve on, just like most receivers, or like every receiver. There is no receiver that's absolutely perfect. But let me get into some. So that happened. I think Sauce also said that he wants to play in New York forever. And one of the things I saw the last couple of weeks was the discourse of, oh, well, let's pay Garrett now, but not Sauce. I do not understand that for the life of me. To me, so far through their 3-year careers, Sauce Gardner has been a better cornerback than Garrett Wilson has been a receiver. And that's just, whether it be on stats or whatever it is, it's just factual. One guy struggled a little bit this year, and struggled for Sauce is him being like a top 10 to 15 cornerback in most categories. That was his struggling year, but it's only considered a struggling year because his first 2 years, he was the number 1, 2, or 3 best corner in the entire NFL. So, like, yeah, struggling for a great corner, which is still a very solid corner. Garrett Wilson has never reached the peak that Sauce Gardner has. Garrett Wilson has never been a top 2, top 3 receiver, or even close to it. There's moments where he plays like a top 10 guy, but Sauce at his worst is a top 10 to 15 guy. And I'd argue, and I don't think it's an argument really, like Garrett, like, yeah, receiver may be more important. Like, if you just choose a roster and, hey, you have a really good corner or a really good receiver, you probably start off with receiver because of the way it's shaded towards offense nowadays. But it's a lot harder, in my opinion, or probably, again, not even an opinion really, just looking at the corners. It's a lot harder to find a really, really good corner than a really, really good receiver. There are a lot of really, really good receivers. So I'm not saying to not pay Garrett and just pay Sauce. I just think it's interesting, the discourse of don't pay Sauce but pay Garrett now. Like, why? If anything, Sauce, like, yeah, he's a little bit immature on social media and stuff like that, but he's demonstrated that he's obviously a great guy. Yeah, a little bit more immature on social media, whatever, but says he loves playing in New York. All that stuff. Is excited about Aaron Glenn and that one little thing on the golf cart. So I just think it's crazy that Garrett deserves the money but not Sauce. It's like, and why? Why? Because we're nervous about losing Garrett? Is that why? Because Garrett's been a little bit more outwardly with his anger about the Jets sucking and him not getting the ball and whatever else it may be. Maybe that's the reason. But to say that Garrett Wilson's been a better receiver than Sauce has been a corner, that's just unequivocally false. There's really no argument you have for that. Yeah, Sauce can't tackle and needs to get more physical at times, but a lot of corners can't tackle. Again, Sauce in his down year was a top 10, 15 guy, whatever it was. Garrett Wilson right now at his best has been a top 10, 15 guy. So, I don't get that, but they get a new member. from Jeff. Appreciate that, Jeff. So you get some new, I think you get some new emojis. You get like a little header. We're going to keep adding stuff to that. Eventually I know I said I was going to do weekly or bi-weekly. I think I missed an extra week in there. So I haven't done a podcast in like 3 weeks. But I'll be at least bi-weekly, probably bi-weekly for a little bit, just because like the extra time between the weeks are going to help me get the film out. Because obviously full-time jobs, son, and moving residences, it's going to be a little bit busy. So I'll probably do bi-weekly. So I apologize for missing the extra week. It's just getting my house showing ready and picture ready was quite the task. We really didn't even know we're necessarily moving, and a house popped up that we really liked. And we're like, okay, I guess we're moving. So that's what we did. Frankie says I want nothing to do with Fields, and I'm okay with that. Like, if you don't want anything to do with Fields, that's fine. But I need kind of what you're going to do then. So that's fine, but is your answer a first or second or a first round or a second round quarterback? If that's your answer, then okay. I'm of the mindset where if they do bring in a first or a second round guy, or maybe even a third round guy, I don't want, let's just say, second round quarterback and Fields. I want one guy to get their attention, like one guy to get the full quarterback room's attention and really focus on those guys. The Jets have not been able to develop a quarterback in over 20 years. I don't want them trying to develop two guys, especially with a running backs coach who's now a quarterbacks coach with Charles London, who is one of the signings, staff hirings I'm the most down on, is him and the offensive line coach. But nonetheless, Aaron Glenn did say that Tanner Engstrand was a tight ends coach, but he's more of an offensive line guy. Okay. Or not Engstrand, whoever the O-line coach is. Engstrand's the OC, the offensive line coach. It did take me a little bit to remember all their names, but the O-line coach is actually a O-line coach who was trapped in a tight ends coach's kind of role. But Charles London, the quarterbacks coach, is probably my least favorite signing that they've made on their staff. So do I want him developing a second round guy and Justin Fields? No. But yeah, Frank, like what's your answer? What's your answer if it's not Fields? And I'm not saying Fields is even an answer, but I'd rather have Tyrod and Fields than Tyrod and Kirk Cousins, because there's no upside with Tyrod and Kirk Cousins. Like, they're the bridge. There's really no hope of them moving on, where at least Fields could have the Sam Darnold, Geno Smith resurgence or whatever it may be. And I'm not saying that's a high likelihood chance, but at least it's 5, 10, 15, 20%, where obviously Kirk Cousins is not going to turn the clock back 5 years. It's just obviously not possible. So Joey Mascara, what's up? Yeah, again, I apologize for missing so many weeks. What's up to Daniel? Dan, RJ says, Joe, tell me which prospects I like. Oops, I mean, whichever prospects you like. So that's funny, RJ. I'll be honest. And like, I'm not one for like, hey, trade up in the draft the quarterback, but can we just be transparent and say that this draft class really sucks? Like, it does. I'm not going to lie to you. It's just a thing where I watched a lot of these guys, or at least at the top, and I wasn't overly impressed. Like, there's not one guy I watched. I'm like, holy crap! If he's on the board at 7 and they don't take him, I'm going to be pissed. My top 3 right now are Graham, Will Johnson, and I didn't watch the corner from Texas, Jade Barron, I believe his name is, and Tyler Warren is probably my 3rd out of there. But you look at the measurables, and obviously the combine happened too. And you guys know more than I do about the combine. I just wasn't really able to keep track of it, again, just so busy. But what's his name? Graham came in at like 296. I think he was listed at like 312, 315. So he's like 15 pounds lighter than I expected him to. And in my opinion, he got moved a little bit more than people say he does. Like, I think he's an explosive, like short area quickness type of athlete, but like long speed, true fluidity. He's not that. He's more like good in a phone booth type of deal. So you have him being underweight, getting moved a little bit more than I like to see. And that's just because you look at the reviews of Mason Graham, and it's, oh my God, his anchor's amazing. He doesn't get moved. He does. And I think he will at the NFL level a little bit. So the weight compounded with the short arms, compounded with where does he fit on this defense? That's my problem, because to me, he's not a 1 tech. He's not a 0 tech. He's not a guy who's going to hold down in there and anchor down in the middle. And Q is at 3 tech. So where exactly does he fit? If he doesn't fit at 0, Q is at 3. You don't put him at 5. And I don't give a shit what anybody says, because I saw like, oh, you can put him in 5 tech in some defensive systems. Like, yeah, if you run a 3-4 and you want him 2 gapping out there, okay, fine. He's not going to get to the quarterback a lot, but that'll obviously be a pretty good piece to have in your, or tool to have in your tool bag if you're going to put him as a a 5-tech D end on the strong side and ask him to 2-gap. Okay, like you could shut down runs like that, but I don't think you want to draft a 5-tech 2-gapper at 7. Because I don't think he's gonna be able to win much pass rush out there. So I don't really I like Graham, but the lack of weight and the lack of arm length do concern me a little bit. On top of the fact that I don't see how he fits in this defense with Q. So that's my concern with him. 2 with Will Johnson is, and people are like, oh, you already have Sauce. Well, yeah, you have 2 corners on the field, so you could definitely use another one. I think they probably go like the Brandon Eccles type route and bring him back and have him compete with Stiggers and see if anybody emerges there and could be the long-term starter. So I think that's probably the way they go. But I like Will Johnson. I like his film. I think he's a better athlete for relative to his position than a Graham. And did he even run, actually? Can anybody send me in the chat what he ran in his 40? Because people are concerned about the long speed. I thought he had average speed. I don't think he's a burner. I don't think he was slow. I think he was kind of average speed. So actually, let me look up what did he even run, because he has an injury. I don't know. Will Johnson 40 times. This is something I should have looked at. Safety. No, that's not him. Will Johnson. Did he run a 4.39? Okay, so I don't know if that's actually true. Yeah, so he ran a 4.39 apparently. That's obviously really good. I don't think he's that fast on film. I think he's probably more of a low 4.4 guy, which is fine. Richard Sherman ran a 4.5, 4.6, I believe. I'm not saying it's Richard Sherman, but I would say Will Johnson is another guy I like. He's, assuming injuries are okay, but based on the fit for the Jets, I would probably put Will Johnson at 1 right now. Graham at 2A, and then probably Warren at 2B. I like Warren's, and I'll put this up here real quick. Fits into it well. Appreciate you, Danger Zone, Dano. Yeah, what my thought on Jets YouTube needs more Blewett. I appreciate that, dude. I'll be back at least again bi-weekly, and free agency starts on Monday, or at least the legal tampering period, which makes no sense. It kind of contradicts, but that starts. I have a lot of film to do from that, and obviously the draft as well. So I'll definitely be back. There's plenty to talk about right now. But Tyler Warren, I think I think he probably is a little bit overrated as a blocker. I think he has the want to, and I think he has the strength to do it. Technically, he needs some work there, but the want to is one of the more important parts. So I would say more of an average blocker with a want to be great. His route running improved later in the year. At first, I don't really see any nuance to the route running, but the last 3, 4, 5 weeks of the season, I started to see some pressure stems and some stair steps, which we'll talk about in the review, and a little bit more nuance. I think he's really good with the ball in his hands after the catch. I don't think he has the most wiggle, but he runs like a freight train, will lower his shoulder for more yards. I think he's relatively good size. I don't know. The measurements probably came out, obviously, 6'5", 250, whatever he is. So he has some good size, good contested catch ability, some pretty good body control. So I like Warren. I think Warren, you're telling me Warren, Campbell, and McMillan are on the board. I'll give me Warren. I don't see it with McMillan. I think McMillan could be good, and don't take it as oh, I don't like this guy. This guy can never be good. I think McMillan in a normal receiver draft would probably be in the early 20s, late 1s, or even maybe a 2nd-round pick. Just based on what I've seen of him, and I watched 8-9 games probably, and I'll have a review out of him. He would be below Drake London. He would be below Dunze. He'd be well below Garrett Wilson, well below Neighbors. I just, he has he's not a fast guy. He's definitely pretty fluid out of his breaks and stuff for his size, but I just don't see anything overly special. And I get the contested catches, but look at how many contested catches did Odunze have in college versus rookie year, or even I'm not saying he's this guy, but look at Hakeem Butler from Arizona State a couple of years ago. I'm not saying it's Hakeem Butler. He moves a lot better than Hakeem Butler, but monster contested catch guy with a monster radius, but never did anything in the NFL. So just because you're a contested catch guy doesn't mean you're going to be good in the NFL. And I didn't see anything minus some fluidity, good fluidities for his size. I didn't see anything where I was oh my God, such nuanced route running or anything great like that. So I think Warren would be my favorite offensive player out of the draft. But with all that being said, I don't love any of these guys, and I wouldn't be necessarily mad if they passed on any of them at 7. Now, if they passed on like one of my top 3 guys for Will Campbell or something like that, like, okay. But that's why I wouldn't be so against them moving up if they really liked Ward, because this draft just it's very, very mid. A lot of these guys, and and this is a crazy thing with the Jets. I believe if they lost to the Jaguars, they would be the 4th pick. And then they could probably trade up a lot easier with the Titans to 1, because the problem with the Titans trading all the way back to 7, there's only a couple of like blue chip players in, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, then you have the quarterbacks, so you don't really want to get out of the top 4, because then the prospect, like tier list like drops a lot. Like you go from blue chip to mid first round guys at 5, 6, and 7. So it just makes it more difficult for the Jets if they would have just lost that game, but nonetheless. Daniel, the world's best oh, you guys are doing it together. Awesome. Dan says, simple. If there's a guy you'd like right now, take him. Don't wait hoping one of the guys next year. Yeah, exactly. Like that's basically what I'm saying. If you like a guy, you get him. It's not, we'll just wait till next year. The class is good. Now, if you don't like a guy this year, then obviously you wait till next year. But if you legitimately like a guy and you think you could develop him into a franchise quarterback and you like his makeup, get him. Don't just push it off to next year. That's stupid. But if you don't like the class, okay, we'll wait. Like that's seemingly obvious, right? I'm sure there's people on YouTube who are not with the seemingly obvious, but nonetheless, my own mind, glad you're back. I appreciate that. Bustin Fields is a waste of money, 100%. It depends on like what's the contract. They said 2 years, $20 million. If they gave $10 million for a shot in the dark, okay. Like, what's that receiver just got 10 mil? He re-upped with somebody and people are like, what? Damn, I'll remember. Tutu Atwell got like $10 million. Like to get a shot in the dark quarterback for $10 million, I wouldn't be mad at it. I really wouldn't be. I personally prefer first, second round quarterback, try to develop them. But if they're not touching quarterback in the draft, Justin Fields is more intriguing to me at the minimum than, again, Kirk Cousins, whoever else it may be. Danger Zone, do you think Fields, Hall, Allen could wear teams down week on? No. Yeah, like Derrick Henry wears guys down. Do I think, like, is there going to be plays where it's 3rd and 12 and you have the perfect coverage call and everybody's locked up and then Justin Fields scrambles for 15 yards on 3rd and 12 and it kind of like breaks the defense back at times? Yeah. But is that going to make up for the lack of efficiency as a passer? No. So like, yeah, it'll wear them down, but I rather just score points, like for, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that's going to wear, like, yeah, it'll wear them down, but I'd rather just be good. I don't think it makes that much of a difference. Another thing to think about, it's easier to get a receiver. Yeah, no doubt, dude. Like it's, if you had to replace one of Sauce or Garrett, you can get a guy closer to Garrett than you could to Sauce in a year or 2. There's just so many good receivers in the NFL. There's not a lot of good corners. It's just a harder position to play. So, yeah. Rico says, pre-show, I can't entertain a trade. Sauce. He's overrated. It's just stupid. The guy wants to play in New York. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. Is he a little bit immature with tweeting stuff and then deleting it? Yeah, but it's nothing like it's nothing like I'm a bust. You guys all suck. It's like defending himself or whatever it is. But yeah, could he stay off of Twitter and maybe get away from like some of the streamers he's with? And yeah, but I don't know. So yeah, there you go. Great minds think alike. Since I know this is a safe space, I can trade Brees. If you're talking about trading Brees or Sauce, yeah, dude, like undoubtedly. Brees was a average running back last year. And that's not being, I'm not being dramatic. I'm not saying anything. He did not break tackles last year. He fell into contact. Like he was not good last year. He was replacement level running back next year or last year. If you replaced him with David Montgomery or something like that, you wouldn't really notice a difference. He didn't really have any, he wasn't explosive last year. And I just thought his vision really suffered. And I really just didn't see him break a lot of arm tackles like at all. So. Okay, so Frankie, so you were the one before who said you don't want Fields, you want Dart. Like, okay, if Dart is your answer, I'm not going to debate you because I haven't watched Dart. From the things I don't love the offense that he comes from. It doesn't seem like it's not the most NFL translatable. But if your answer is, hey, I like Dart over Fields, then fine. Like that's as long as you have an answer, then I'm completely okay with that. Like that's how I look at it. So, but if you're like, I hate Fields and some 7th round quarterback is my answer, then I would question you. But Dart's late first, early second, whatever he's going to be, guy. So respectable. I can't debate it. But Frankie, if you were still in here, if the Jets were to not draft the quarterback, would you be okay with Justin Fields? Because that's basically what I'm saying. If they were bringing nobody in the draft, they want Fields, and fine, right? If they don't like anybody. James, hey, what is up, James? Fight and Flight podcast, trade back for a 2026 second minimum. Now the problem here is if you trade back, and it actually looks like somebody's going to join us in a second. But if you trade back, Fight and Flight, who is trading up, right? Like we could say that, but who then wants to move up for what? Like, are they moving up for Jackson Dart? Are they moving up for Shedeur Sanders? Are they moving up for Mason Graham? Like, who are they moving up for? We are joined by Michael Nania. I did not know Michael was going to jump on.
Hello, I'm crashing the show.
So
how are we doing? Free agency.
I initially told Nania that I was going to start at like noon, and I was like, oh, I got to push it back quite a bit. And he's like, oh, we'll see if I can join. And then here he is. So Michael, I'm actually going to have to go and grab an AirPod really quickly so it doesn't screw it up. So I'll get an AirPod. You could talk about the draft a little bit. I'm going to try to catch the end of it, but give them I just talked about my top 3 prospects in the draft. Like, where do you stand in the draft? What do you want them to do in terms of trading up for a quarterback? If not, if Sanders is there at 7, that's kind of what I just discussed. And then who do you like at 7 as like a prospect if you want to take a quarterback?
Yeah.
And I'm going to grab those pods.
Yeah, well, I was listening to Blewett earlier at the start of the show before I hopped on, and I'm on the same page in terms of the idea that if you do really like a quarterback prospect, I think you have to go get him. And we saw a couple of teams do that last year with Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Both of them were considered major reaches based on where they were in the consensus big board overall. But, those 2 teams reached to get them. And I feel like both of those teams are in good spots now with those prospects. So quarterback is just too important, I think, to punt it, because you just don't know what next year's class is going to look like, where you're going to be in the draft order, especially when you're as high as the Jets are. So I agree with what Blewett said in that if the Jets really feel strongly about someone, they should make it happen and not assume that they're going to get a chance next year. But I also agree that this class isn't very impressive. I honestly feel like Ward is the only true first-round prospect in this class based on what I've watched so far. And even in that respect, I think it's more of like in most classes, he would be 4th to 5th. But with that being said, given the demand for quarterbacks, I would like if the Jets had the number 1 pick, I would absolutely vouch for taking him there. But would I trade up for the number 1 pick or even 2? That I don't think they're in a position to afford. So that's kind of my stance with the quarterbacks for now. I know Robbie's got a Jackson Dart film breakdown coming out soon. I'm curious to see what his opinion is on him. I don't personally see Dart as having enough potential to be worth that reach at number 7. But if the Jets feel that way, I do think it's justified to do that.
Yeah, and then in terms of the other prospects, obviously being realistic, because you say Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter and all that stuff. I'm not sure how much of the draft you really got into, but obviously if you haven't, just be forefront with that. And then top 3 past that, like realistically past Hunter, past Abdul Carter. Do you have like a preference right now on obviously March 8th? You got quite a bit to go to evaluate these guys, but
I'm a Tyler Warren guy right now, and it feels a little weird because our whole kind of stance last year was anti Brock Bowers, but I feel like that's because, the Bowers stance was less about Bowers and more about prioritizing a tackle in the Jets' particular situation and positional value and need and things like that. But I think a tight end going this high is justifiable if he is a special enough prospect to where you believe when you draft him, he's an instant impact top 5 to 10 tight end, which, we've seen multiple times in recent years as possible between Kyle Pitts' rookie year and Bowers. Considering the salary that's allocated to a tight end, They're immediately, if you take them this high, one of the highest paid guys at the position. If
Mhm.
they're that good, and if your offense values them that highly, because there's a disparity to that. Tight end is more important to some teams than others. But it
Yep.
looks like the Jets are going to be a team that values them. So if all those boxes are checked, I think it can be justified. And I like what I've seen from Warren and just his overall profile enough to believe that he can be worth the investment at number 7. It's a very important position for the Jets. And just watching him, his versatility and the way he could be impactful as a weapon in a variety of ways, lining up all over the formation, whether it's in line, in the slot, out wide. I really like his route running and his ability to win and create opportunities, because I think Yak is great, but I think what really separates the best weapons in the receiving game, whether it's tight end or a wide receiver, is being able to separate and create chances to move the ball down the field, more so than just capitalizing. And I think he's capable of doing that. So I think Warren right now is my preferred option at that pick.
Okay. Yeah, no, Warren's in my top 3, I would say. And again, like I think in a normal year, it's an uninspiring class, but in this draft, I'd be okay with Tyler Warren. I like the versatility, like you said. And the Jets obviously they don't even have a tight end on the roster, right? Minus Jeremy Ruckert, but he's a tight end 3 at best, probably.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the discourse this last couple of weeks of and it's only maybe it was only like a small segment on Twitter, but obviously it popped up on my timeline. But the pay Garrett Wilson now crowd, but not Sauce Gardner. What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think both are worth paying, but if it were only going to be one, I definitely think it's Sauce. He's just relative to his position, clearly the better player
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what's proven to this point. I think Garrett, I mean, I don't know. Sauce is probably the best corner in the league the previous 2 years. I don't think Garrett's going to get to that height. I think he can ascend from where he's at, but yeah, I think it's kind of ridiculous to suggest that Sauce isn't worth. Just in general, I think Sauce's body of work, like, yeah, this last year wasn't up to his standards, but if I told you his first 3 seasons, he'd have 2 first team All Pro appearances,
Mm-hmm.
number 1 in multiple stats related to coverage, you would take that. And obviously, it got laid out in a way where his first 2 years were better and the third year was down, but the down year was still, better than most corners. So I don't think it has a major effect on his value, especially because Surtain also had a down year before he signed his previous deal. And he immediately responded and showed that he's a player that he is over the whole, body of work throughout his career, not just the one season.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely think the Sauce talks are a little down on him compared to what they should be.
I think like a lot of it, like his down year was a top 10, 15 corner year. Like it's not that bad. People
Yeah.
are talking about like he's an absolute scrub, which is a joke. But RJ says, have you taken a look at Ward? Would be interested to know if you think he's worth trading up for. It's kind of a hard question to answer because it doesn't really matter if what I think should the Jets. So my answer more falls like if the Jets think he's a top, the top guy in the draft, I wouldn't be mad at them doing it. The physical traits are definitely there. Though the way he could zip a ball, his quick release, his general accuracy is pretty good. If he does miss, he misses high. And there's times like Zach Wilson can put a little bit too much like oomph on a ball over the middle where he doesn't necessarily need to. He can make it a little bit easier on the receiver. There's some pocket drifting. He fades out a lot of throws. He steps in the bucket a lot when he throws, which can make him overcompensate with his upper body, make him overthrow. But there's a lot of there's instances where he reads the defense really good. 1, 2, 3, gets the ball out really smooth, finds the open guys. But then there's times where he holds the ball a little bit too long, takes a sack. And there are times that are a little bit frustrating with me. And it's kind of like it comes with Ward where like he'll make big plays and then frustrate you with other ones. Like there's times where his number 1 or 2 are open and he'll skip them looking for a bigger play. And then he gets sacked or to throw the ball away and say, dude, it's 1st and 10, just take the 5 yards on the, on the hitch or whatever the route is. So there's some frustration with Ward too. But if you think you can hone in his over aggressiveness a little bit, teach him to start stepping up into the pocket instead of out of it, and to just trust and transparently, his offensive line at Miami kind of sucked. So I get him being a little bit eager to leave the pocket, but at NFL level, he's going to have to step up in the pocket more. He's have to stop fading out of throws, and he's got to hit guys when they're open. You don't want to completely limit his aggressiveness, but he's got to take the easy stuff a little bit more at the NFL level. So I like Ward. The physical upside is ridiculous. Like he's a big dude. He moves really well. His arm is really, really great. The mental side is lacking there at times, but so for physical upside, I think he could be worth it. Do I think he's some slam dunk Andrew Luck prospect that I would be willing to move up for one? Like, no doubt about it. No. But that's not necessarily the question. It's more again if the Jets like think that he's worth moving up for in a bad class. If this is a normal class and you can get studs at 7, I would say definitely not. But in this class, it's so weak, I wouldn't be mad at it. That's kind of the best answer I can give, because like me, probably not, right, but I wouldn't be mad at it. You know, it's really hard. How stoked are you that we just learned that which by the way, like, I don't know who put it out there, but like, the Jets are trying to shop Devontae Adams, and all these fans are like pissed that the Jets didn't get anything for Devontae Adams. He was owed what? It was at $36 or $38 million, and the Jets saved $29.30 by cutting him. Who was going to trade for a $36 million receiver when you know he's going to get cut, and he's already telling teams that he prefers to play for them on the West Coast? So it's between it's between the Rams, the Chargers, and another team I forgot, the Niners. Yeah. You know, it's like it was one of those teams would be idiots to pay anything for a guy who's that big of a contract. So they were never going to be able to trade him. They didn't. They cut him. Now, we initially thought they traded their early third for Devontae Adams, which is like pick 75, right? When instead they actually traded pick 94. Is that correct? So the Jets moved up 19 spots in the third round, which yes. I thought I saw it on Twitter. That's equivalent to about a 4th round pick in value. So the Jets moved up a lot higher in a draft that's very good in that kind of 2nd, 3rd round range. So I think that's pretty huge. So definitely happy about that, but no surprise that Devontae got cut. I thought it was, the discourse on Twitter was kind of wild to see like people being mad at the Jets for not being able to trade him. And in what world would they be able to trade him? I don't understand that.
Oh yeah, even when the trade rumor came out, I thought it was, just due diligence. There wasn't really any leverage for any team to give up anything for Adams when they knew he was going to be released anyway, and that he has, preferences with, does he want to play with Rodgers? Does he want to play in the West Coast? That vastly limits the trade market for the Jets. So it didn't seem like they were going to get anything anyway. So that wasn't surprising. And yeah, the draft pick news is awesome. I mean, it doesn't get much better than just finding out your team moved up 19 spots in the draft for nothing. Just you're 19 spots higher. We had it wrong. It doesn't get a lot better than that. So yeah, like you said, I think the meat of this class is whoever wins this class is going to win it in the rounds 2 through 4, more so than here are the 10 elite guys. And because I think, was that 2011? I think 2011 was like that. There are some drafts where there's just all these blue chip prospects and you want to be at the top and they're just rattling them off. I don't know if this one's going to be like that, besides maybe the top 5 or 6. Maybe it gets to the Jets at 7 if they can get Warren. It doesn't feel like it's that. And so for the Jets to get that huge move up in the 3rd round out of nowhere is definitely positive news. I don't know why that wasn't reported on, more accurately. Maybe that's another conversation, but
it's not my job.
Not our job. No.
What's up to NY Jets superfan Danger Zone? Another question: which consensus top 10 players would you not be willing to stick and pick at 7? Well, obviously, like, part of that conversation is, well, who trades up, right? I think with pretty much every single player in this draft, if you could trade back, like, there's nobody who's me sitting at 7, whether that be Graham, Warren, or any one of these guys, where I'm going to say, hey, I'd rather kick this player over a trade back. So my answer is always going to be trade back, especially in a draft that's not strong at the top. So that's always going to win. Now, I'll kind of change the question and say, like, which players would you be kind of disappointed with? And really, it's anybody outside of Graham, Graham, Johnson, or Warren. I don't like McMillan. I don't really like Campbell. And even with Graham, I know you said you were listening.
I was just gonna say, like, I heard you earlier talking
Yeah.
about Graham. You mentioned some of the criticisms and scheme fit, but even considering all that, would you still consider him a solid
Yeah,
pick
like
there
you
at
do.
7?
I just don't. I just don't see it, because where does he play? Like, there's no way he could play. He's
Yeah.
not a nose tackle. He's not close to a nose tackle. He's only 300 pounds, and he's not going to play 3 tech. So is he a run stuffing 5 tech, and or like is he Sheldon Richardson, like outside linebacker type deal for Rex Ryan? Like, I just don't see how he fits. So like, I would be okay with the talent. I would have huge questions about, like, I would be pretty lukewarm on it just because I don't think he fits. So yeah, like, Dana, like, really, it's trade back, like, over everything, trade back. I just don't see, if we want to trade back that bad, no teams want to trade up, right? Like, who are they trading up for? Unless it's a quarterback or something like that. Maybe if Sanders is on the board, they could trade back. But yeah, I'm always trade back. I could say that, like, McMillan, Campbell, I would be like, ugh, okay, like, fine, but not great. How does Tech compare to Drake London coming out as prospect? To me, I think Tech's probably a little bit more smooth than Drake London. Drake London is a lot more physical. Drake London, I think, set himself up better at USC for contested catches, better than Tech does. Like, it was more translatable. And he's more physically dominant than Tet in boxing guys out, things like that. So I think Tet's a little bit more smooth, but Drake London was more technically savvy and more physical. So if you're telling me, like, hey, Drake London or Tet, at the time of their drafts, I'm taking Drake London 100 times out of 100 over Tet. That's me personally and how I evaluate guys. I just didn't see the same nuance in route running, and again, the same physicality. And if you're going to be a mostly contested catcher at the NFL level, you better be damn physical. And I didn't see Tet be as physical with boxing guys out as I wanted to be. Like, the ability to catch contested was impressive, but that's more for, like, highlight tape practicey shit, where in the NFL level, you better be physical if you're going to box guys out. DeAndre Hopkins, Drake London, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, these type of guys. You don't really see, like, lanky, less physical contested catch guys. It just doesn't necessarily always mix. So I don't love it. Will Johnson, on the other side of Sauce, would be the perfect complement. Will Johnson, considering, and I didn't even see that he ran a 4.39 at the combine, which is crazy for him. It's actually really, really good for him. Would you be opposed to, like, taking a corner? So I personally lean, I think they're going to probably bring back Eccles and let him compete with Stiggers, and that's the cornerback too. But with that being said, if they did take Johnson at 7, would you be appalled?
I wouldn't, honestly. And I just did an article about Eccles. I'm not a fan of that idea. I don't think that Eccles has warranted the opportunity to compete for a starting job. I just don't think the production is there. Besides a handful of interceptions, he's been beat pretty frequently when he's played. He's not a good tackler or run defender. So they have the 2 young guys there who can compete. And, it depends on what Glenn and Wilkes think, since they've come in and watched their film, because they don't have the draft attachment to them. So hopefully they like them and give them an opportunity to compete, and the Jets could, make this happen from within, because it would just be great from a salary cap standpoint and team building. But if they don't like them, if they don't do much in free agency, and they like Will Johnson, I would be okay with it. I know that they just used a pick on Sauce a couple of years ago, so maybe it would get some criticism. But at this point, it's a big hole if they don't bring back Reed, which they're not. Yeah, I think I would not be opposed to it. But I'm curious to see what they do with corner and free agency. Are they just going to count on the young guys that they have? Are they going to throw Eccles back into that competition? Do they go for a Carlton Davis, reunite him with Aaron Glenn? There's a lot of ways they could go, but it is something that needs to be addressed with a legitimate solution, because I think that impact that Sauce has can be negated if you can really easily pick on the other side, because Sauce has played his whole career so far with Reed, who was, a very solid starter. And I think that helps the impact, because avoiding him, only when you avoid him, you're still going at pretty good corners. It's not like, Sauce is just sitting over there getting cardio and the teams are having success going to the other side. It's complementary when the entire cornerback unit is strong. And as of right now, the Jets don't have that. So I think, you know, it is worthwhile to value continuing that three-way success that they have with Sauce, Carter, and the other spot.
Yeah. And with like, I think Reed is going to get overpaid in free agency. I do. Like, he might be good for a year, but 28-year-old quarter or 28-year-old corner who relies a lot on his athleticism. Is he going to be good? 5'9" at 29, 30 years old? Maybe not. At least for the money he's going to get paid, but that'll be interesting to see. Some people are saying, and by the way, people before said they went from pick 92 to 73. So that's my mistake. Just off the top of my head, it was 95 to 70 or whatever it was. So yeah, 73 to 92 or whatever it was. So, and past that, people are saying he didn't run. I looked up his 40 time and it said 4.39. So maybe he didn't test, but the website I went to, he said he ran his 40. So maybe he didn't. I do think he's probably a low 4.4, high 4.5 type of guy, but it's okay. I'm soured on T-Mac. Yeah, I don't think he's great. I think realistically, in a good draft, he's again early 20s, anywhere from there to probably early second round, in my opinion. Thoughts? James asks thoughts on Will Campbell. The problem with Will Campbell is so for me, I would be okay with trying him out at tackle and then moving him into guard if he fails a tackle, right? Now, with that being said, that was before the combine. The combine, I think he came with 32-inch arms, and there's only a handful of guys at the NFL level who have ever been successful with 34 or below 33-inch arms. I'm sorry. 33 is kind of like the benchmark you want to get to, and even that's kind of short. You really want 34 or above. And I believe he has 32 or 33, so he's already working from an extremely disadvantageous spot in his NFL career. So I think he's probably going to be a guard just because of the arm length. So I would not be thrilled with him at 7 either. So I would say no to him at 7. Stanley Mann says, hopefully someone loves Shedeur Sanders and trades up to draft him. If we can get more picks, that'd be great. Which I'll transition to this question. Josina Anderson comes out and says teams, there's a team in the top 7, which is obviously weird wording because you either say top 5 or top 10. You don't say top 7. But nonetheless, if it is the Jets or just in general, people are saying that the Jets would never draft him because of his bravado and his cockiness. Now, obviously, it's smokescreen season, right? People are like, oh my God, these rumors on Twitter, this guy like that guy, or this rumor, it is smokescreen season. Do not believe anything on Twitter, at all. But if you do buy into it a little bit, teams are a little bit concerned about, again, the bravado, the cockiness, and all that stuff. Do you see the Jets no way we could draft this guy? We don't want to deal with his dad. He's too cocky. That's not Aaron Glenn's type of guy. Or how do you feel? How would you feel the Jets are sitting there at 7? They didn't trade up. They kind of like Shedeur Sanders, and they end up taking him there. What are your feelings on him?
It's hard to say because we're still so early in learning about this regime and their preferences. But the one thing we do have, the one major thing, is the Rodgers decision, and it does feel like that was strongly influenced by off-field factors in terms of just, like we talked about, the looming presence that he kind of brings to the team and the culture off the field, whether it's, his fault or not, it just came with his presence being there. So that does kind of point to maybe the Jets are, with this regime, opposed to the idea of a Sanders type and just everything that comes with that. And, similar to Rodgers, that might not even be his fault as an individual. It's just because of his name and his brand and everything that comes with him, it's just going to bring more attention. So is that something they're opposed to because of the Rodgers decision? Potentially. I feel like we need to see some more to understand what their stance is on that sort of thing. But I would lean yes, but it's just hard to say. And in terms of Campbell, that's another prospects like him are also going to be interesting in learning about Muji and his preferences in terms of, measurables and things like that, because there was that video from when he was in Denver and he was talking about, measurable thresholds and how they would eliminate guys if they were below certain, thresholds in different categories, whether it was the testing times or length and things like that. And a guy like Campbell, he comes in at 32 and 5/8 on the arm length. That's way, way below what a tackle should be. So he said that, but he also kind of balanced it out and said, sometimes you don't want to allow a couple of inches to override years of good film on the field. So he kind of had this balanced take where he acknowledged the value of measurables while also saying that it's not going to always just eliminate the film and what they do on the field. So guys like Campbell and, who have maybe measurable deficiencies but are good players, it'll be interesting to see how they value them in this draft and drafts going forward to get a feel for, is Muji going to be a guy who's all about the RAS score and the testing and guys have to be analytically matched to what tends to work? Or are they more leaning towards the football player who has the most impressive film type of side? Or are they going to balance it and go both ways? So I'm curious to see, both with the Sanders question and, culture and all that, and then both the film versus analytics side. I'm curious to learn what the preferences and philosophies are for this regime.
Yeah, it's interesting with Sanders because could he be a top 12-ish guy? Yeah, but what is his ceiling? That's the problem. So if you think he's super safe and he's gonna be a top 12 guy, right into that 12 to 15 range, 10 to 15 range, like the Dak Prescott's, Kirk Cousins of the world, okay, you can win with them, but is that what you're gonna draft in the top 10? I don't know. Tua's of the world, I'm not sure, but we'll see what happens if he's obviously on the board. Stanley says they should get Dart in the third. I don't think he's gonna drop to the third based on hype. I would bet that he's a late first before I would say he's a third. So Fields is definitely worth 10 million. Yeah, I saw the rumor 2 years, 20 million. I thought at first, I said definitely not. If Tutu Atwell is getting $10 million a year, Fields is going to get $10 million a year, in my opinion. So a lot of smoke around that. To me personally, and I said this before, I wouldn't want to bring in Fields and a rookie. It's either one or the other. You have a rookie staff. I don't want them having too many kind of things to be working on. Just work on Fields or work on the rookie. And that's about it. So let's see, probably needs to trade up into the top 5, then go to up to 1. I don't think any of the top 4 teams really want to move unless it's for a King's ransom. There's only a couple of guys who are you really want to be in the top 3 this year. So if you don't like Sanders, you want to either be in a spot where a team can trade up for Ward, or you want Carter or Hunter. And that's really it. So I just don't see how the Jets are going to get up there, but I guess we'll see. Stanley asks, what could the Jets get for Brees? Maybe a 4th round pick? Yeah, at best, right? You're not going to get much more for a running back who was mid last year on his rookie contract. It's just not much more than that. Eventually you are going to have to hit on your later picks for the offensive line, which, by the way, I guess Morgan Moses passed his physicals. There was rumors earlier on that Morgan Moses wouldn't be re-upping with the Jets. I don't know where that was based from, but it seems like there's been at least some apparent steam between the Jets and Morgan Moses, and maybe him re-signing. To me, do it. It's fine. He's a guy who's at least could be average. Draft a guy in the 4th round, whatever it is. Let him develop behind Morgan Moses. Now, if there's obviously a stud-lead right tackle who they love in free agency, who's 26, 27, 28 years old, and I don't know his name off the top of my head, then yeah, fine, grab him. But I'm okay with the plan of Morgan Moses for $5-6 million, whatever it is, and drafting a guy. So I would definitely welcome Morgan Moses back. And then again, like Wild Wave says, a late round guy.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a great free agent tackle class. So I don't think there's a long-term solution, or even in the stopgap type of tier, I don't think they're going to do better than Moses. So, he's familiar with the culture and the teammates, that just to have some of that continuity and chemistry would be valuable for them as well. So I'm definitely all aboard for Moses returning and then supplementing that in the draft.
Meatball Palm says, have you had a chance to check out Milrow? I haven't. I know the Jets were apparently meeting with him a decent amount at the combine. He's a guy who, based on what we've heard about Glennon, he wants a mobile quarterback. He would obviously fit that. He's a bigger guy, again, mobile, really good athleticism, but I guess really struggles on the mental side of the game. So I could see that being a guy they draft in the 2nd, 3rd round or something like that. But have I personally checked him out? No, I haven't. Have you seen anything on Milrow, Nanya, or no?
I haven't watched any film yet, but I looked at some of the numbers when I was running through kind of the scheme fit stuff, like who's good at play action, who's good over the middle, and things like that. And he was the one guy who kind of consistently ranked at or near the bottom in some of those things. So that was kind of a red flag. But one guy who was near the top was Jackson Dart. Although when I watched him personally, I didn't love the ceiling. And I was kind of watching him from the perspective of does he have the ceiling to justify reaching a number 7, kind of in the way that, the Broncos and Falcons did last year? I didn't really see it. Did you talk about Dart yet, or kind of what your thoughts are on him?
No, I really like, so I was thinking about watching him, and then both individually, I don't think it was conspiracy, but both you and Rivka messaged me like, do not watch Dart. We do not like him. He's not great, basically. And I was like, it doesn't really make me want to like him. So I guess while he's at the top of all these like analytical metrics and stuff, you still watched him, and you weren't, seemingly from what I took away from it, and this was a couple of weeks ago, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you didn't see any like really high physical upside with him, right? Was that your take? So what is your overall thoughts on Dart? Now I'm assuming absolutely not at 7, but like trading up from the second to the early second or late first, something like that. Like, how would you feel about that type of situation with Dart?
Yeah, I just didn't feel like, and again, I kind of watched it from that lens of, the steam that was kind of gaining. Maybe it's cooled off a little bit, maybe it's picking up. I don't really know, but it was starting to rise that the Jets might consider taking him at 7. So I was kind of watching from that lens. Like, do we see the ceiling that should justify top 10 pick? Not where he's at right now, what he could be. And like, I thought he was a good functional leader of the offense, made good decisions. I think his general accuracy was pretty good. Like, there's not a high amount of those just whiffed layup type throws. So I thought he's pretty consistent and solid, but I just didn't really see the ceiling that I feel like gets associated with him. I think he throws deep very frequently, and that kind of gives the impression that there's arm talent and, explosiveness there. But I didn't really see that the arm strength popped off, or his mobility wasn't that special to me. I don't know. It just didn't feel like, okay, this is a guy we could draft at 7 and work with. Second round, I still don't know, because I feel like you still want that ceiling for a high second round pick where the Jets are sitting. I don't think it would be a bad pick if they did, because I understand why people like him. It's just, for me personally, if I were in that chair making the decision, I didn't get the sense that he's the type of guy I would spend a premium asset on to develop, because I didn't see the difference making traits, because there are so many guys in the league like that right now that it's almost, the things that are considered special are almost average at this point, because there are so many great athletes at the quarterback position that if you're not that, whether it's overall athleticism, speed, quickness, agility, pocket movement, arm strength, whatever physical traits you have, there are so many guys in the league that are special in those areas that if you're not, then you're just kind of, your ceiling is capped at about average. And with him, I just didn't feel like I saw those things. And like you said with Sanders too, it's kind of similar. Again, I think he's a smart quarterback. His general accuracy is great. I think his floor is good, but I just didn't feel the athleticism or arm strength, arm talent was quite that high for the top 10 pick. So that's kind of the sense I got.
It's going to be interesting too with like the Jets, because if you're going to draft a guy, you kind of hope it would be in the first round. But if they draft a guy in the second round, it's still somewhat of premium capital. But in the second round, it's like assumed that, okay, he's probably going to take some time. So do you draft a guy in the second round, let him sit all year, and then you don't draft the guy in the first round next year because you have a guy in the second round who's cooking? Like, it's kind of a weird situation with the Jets, because you kind of want to figure out what he is right now in case you have to go back out for a quarterback. So I don't know if they're going to get one. I feel like get one early, but maybe they don't draft one at all, and it's just Tyrod and Fields this year. I'm definitely not in the mindset, oh, just pass it on the next year because it's so much better. If they don't like one of the guys, fine. I'm okay with that. Frankie says, if you told me right now they're not drafting a quarterback this year, then I could live with Fields because Cousins or Russ does nothing for this team. Yeah, exactly. That's where I stand. Cousins could be better than Fields, but there's no chance of upside where, again, even if it's 5% that Fields can turn into Geno Smith or Sam Darnold, I rather take that risk than having Kirk Cousins and Tyrod. Just give me some semblance of hope where I can get excited when Justin Fields checks in week 4 when the Jets are, whatever, struggling or whatever the situation is. Outlaw asked about Ted McMillan. I said it before. I would be very lukewarm. Now there's traits like he could obviously be a T Higgins. He could be one of those type of players, but I just don't. For T Higgins was also a second round pick, right? I think he's the first pick of the second round actually. I just don't see the top 10. If we were picked 23, okay, sure, take him in a normal draft, but top 10 for him seems like quite a reach. But again, it's just what the draft class is. It sucks. So people talk about Membu or whatever. He was a tackle who drafted crazy in the combine. If they want to take him, fine. I don't think at 7 and a trade down, okay. There was somebody saying before, like, oh, you don't want to invest too many premium assets in offensive line. Now, yeah, you'd want at least one of your offensive linemen, or all of them really to be all 7th round pick studs. But I wouldn't be mad if they wanted to draft a 1st round tackle, right, and just completely solidify the offensive line. I wouldn't be upset. While also acknowledging that, a good drafting team should be able to get guys late, but I still wouldn't be mad at it. Eagle says that with his PSU bias, that Tyler Warren and Carter are the number 1 and 2 best players in the draft. Travis Hunter, obviously he's up there, right? But if you had Warren as your 3, I wouldn't think you're crazy. But I haven't watched Hunter though either. Maybe he's getting overhyped because he plays both sides of the ball. But I'm gonna assume not. But let's see. Tony the GM says Dart is a 2-year project with a very low
quick thing here also on the
okay.
I was just going to bring up a quick thing on the quarterback talk we were just having in terms of the 2nd round picks. So the last 3 drafts, because I was thinking about this and I was right. There's only 1 quarterback taken in the 2nd round in the last 3 drafts. That was Levis last year or 2 years? 22 years. So only 1 2nd round quarterback the last 3 drafts. It's kind of like become an endangered species sort of, because I feel like if a quarterback is good enough to be considered round 2, those guys are kind of just getting pushed into the 1st round now because there's so much desperation for it. Like I think last year, a couple of guys who got taken were probably considered round 2, but if you like them, it's like, screw it, let's get them. There's no reason to wait. So yeah, it's weird. I know Jalen Hurts is obviously a great example of a 2nd round pick working out. That was 5 years ago at this point. But it's just something that hasn't really happened. So it's a curious position, like you said, because it's premium enough to almost take you out of the running for a quarterback the next year. But if he's a 2nd round pick, he's also not quite good enough to have a high chance of panning out. So it's a really weird
future round
spot, especially, like if you do take a guy like Dart, he's still there at the Jets 2nd round pick. It feels like a value, but then you just wonder, there are a lot of other teams that need quarterbacks, and there was a whole round that went by and nobody jumped on him. Is he really worth taking at this pick when we could have another starter at a different position? So the 2nd round quarterback it's a weird middle ground right now in the league that we just don't see much anymore.
Yeah. Ted McMillan, they compare to Mike Evans. I'll say no. Mike Evans is much more physically dominant than Ted, in my opinion. So I don't think that's a great comparison. It's just contested catch guys tall. Sauce got Defensive Player of the Year, voted as a rookie, and his floor is so far top 15. So I said Sauce's floor is top 10 to 15. And that's Garrett Wilson's ceiling right now, or that's at least the peak of where he's been. Like Garrett's never been a top 10 guy at this point in his career. And do not just give me stats. There's, again, things he can work on. So do you like Ward enough to give up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a 3rd? Me personally, no. I would say no. But if the Jets liked him enough, then fine. I don't think it would take that much, though. I think it would probably take like 2 firsts, a 2nd, and like a 3rd. I don't think it's going to take 2 seconds and a 3rd, but so I would say no to that. But yeah, pick 73. Yeah, they went up from pick 92 to 73, right? That's, yeah, there you go. Evo Joe says it's a no-brainer. The Jets take the quarterback in this draft at some point. I don't know what that means. If so, what round and who? I'm like I don't think it's a no brainer. Really, if they don't take a guy in round 1, I don't really want Dart in round 2, to be honest. Like based on what everybody's saying and the limited upside, I'm almost more of the mindset like, hey, if you're not going to draft a guy in round 1 or 2, like I would almost be more okay with a guy like Milroe in 3 and 4, just because if you saw what you had in him this year and he sucked and you moved on, like okay, you wasted a 3rd or 4th round pick, not the biggest deal in the world, but he has enough physical upside where maybe it does work. Like I think if you drafted Dart in the 2nd and then drafted another guy next year in the 1st, like it'd be almost like too much value. Whereas if they drafted Milroe in the 3rd or 4th round and then brought a guy in the 1st round next year, like, yeah, it's a lot of capital towards the 1st round, but like not an overabundance of capital, if that makes sense. So I'm almost more leaning towards like, yeah, get Milroe in like the 3rd or 4th and just see what happens if they're going to draft the guy, or bring in a Fields and wait until next year. Now, with that being said, if you wait until next year, you have to plan accordingly, right? Like you're not going to trade a bunch of 4th or 5th this year for anybody. You want to stack up your resources so you can trade up next year. So you have to be smart with how you allocate. Yeah, I would say, okay, 3rd, 4th round, Milroe, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, something like that. But 1st or 2nd round, I don't think it's going to happen in this draft based on what I'm kind of hearing, feeling, seeing. Yeah, sorry, Donnie, there was a little bit of a delay too, so I'm trying to just time it. RJ says, why can't Graham play 3-tech? Well, because Q plays 3-tech, and you're not going to really have two. You see, like that was at least 7 seconds late, but nonetheless, because Q plays 3-techs, you're not going to line up 2 3-techs. Like you're gonna need a 1, you're gonna need a 0, in there as well, because you got to get over the, at least in the area of the center. So you're not going to have 2 3s and then 2 5s or 7s. So you got to have a guy in the interior. Q already plays that, and I don't want to miscast Q as a nose tackle because that's not what he is. He is a 3-tech. So I just don't see how Graham necessarily fits in this defense. So it's a little bit concerning if they do draft him, but we'll see. Danger Zone says so. We basically gave up a 4th for Adams, which is more tolerable. Yeah, right. Really late 3rd, so we'll take that. Danger Zone also says you don't have to convince me to trade back. That's for sure. I want 4 top 100 picks and maybe an extra top 50 pick next year. Yeah, you tell me like best outcome this draft. It's either the Jets get a quarterback, they trade up for Ward or they trade back. Like I don't want to just stick and pick at 7. That's for sure. If they do, I gave you my 3 preferences, but that's it. Will Johnson did not run at the combine. Okay. Yeah, that's what a lot of people are saying. Okay. Yeah, I've been so busy with the move and stuff that I couldn't watch it, but I saw online that he ran, but apparently not. Select a franchise quarterback 26 draft, trade down and fix our needs. Tony Alexio, I'm so with you there, but again, you need 2 to tango, right? Who's trading up for what? Sanders at 7. Yeah, that's the point.
Right.
Fight and Flight podcast says, who are your top offensive tackles in free agency if the Jets do lose out on Moses? So the only thing I will say is I haven't really looked at it. One guy I am intrigued by is Jedrick Wills, because he's a guy I really liked out of Alabama. He played right tackle at Alabama, and he struggled at the NFL level at left tackle. So I think a guy who's probably 26, 27, 28 years old now, giving him a shot at right tackle, you bring in like a 3rd or a 4th round guy to compete with him. I think that would be like an okay stopgap with a relatively high ceiling. So I would say Moses, Jedrick Wills are probably my 1 and 2. But transparently, I didn't really look a lot. So Michael, what do you think about those 2 options? And do you have any kind of like dark horse guys at right tackle?
Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, it's not a strong tackle class. It's kind of, and some of the guys who may have been good are already getting signed, like Jackson from the Rams. But it's a lot of that Moses tier, 30 plus guys who have been starters and are good enough to start, but they're not stars anymore. So actually one guy who stood out, and maybe Jets fans would laugh at it, but Kelvin Beachum is still pretty solid, and he plays right tackle now for the Cardinals. He's not a good run blocker, but his pass blocking has still been pretty good, and he continued to start the last few years. So if they don't get Moses and they want a similar type guy, just short-term 30-plus vet who's a, solid starting level player, I think he's in that tier. But other than that, it's a lot of backups. It's not really impressive. So that's why I think Moses should be prioritized for that spot just to hold it down going into the draft.
Yeah. Joseph Patterson says, respectfully, Joe, I'm not sure we know how good Garrett is or even could be. I said I think Garrett could be a top 10 receiver, like based on his traits and his explosion and stuff like that. I'm just saying he has not been that at this point. We continue to say, in my opinion, both Brees and Sauce kind of quit last year. To be honest with Sauce, I think he was injured in some way. He didn't seem like he had the same level of athleticism, like still a great athlete, but not an elite one when he's an elite athlete the first 2 years. And Brees, like, did he give up? I don't know. And obviously, if he did, that's a problem, right? Like, I'm not going to say, oh, well, he gave up. Don't excuse everything they did. But Brees, in terms of his vision, was not good last year. In terms of his tackle breaking, was not good last year. And again, like with Garrett, I don't just evaluate receivers when they get targets or their stats. I think there's ways that Garrett can definitely improve. So I don't think saying he's a top 10 to 20 guy is a huge like shot at him, especially considering the level of talent in the NFL currently at receiver. And again, I did say that he could be a top 10-ish guy. So, regardless, Fields would guarantee his number one pick next year. I would bet a lot of money that if they had Fields, they would not be number one pick next year. I think Justin Fields is better than Zach Wilson, and Zach Wilson got us to 7 wins, 2 years in a row or whatever it was. So if this coaching staff is competent, Fields can get us 7-8 wins. And yeah, they struggled, but they were were they 4-2 with Fields or 4-1 or something like that with Fields? So let's see.
4-2.
All right. Verge Tibbs says, what's good? What's up? Verge. James says, hi, Joe and Mike. I am the 77-year-old Titans Jets fan. Glenn and I are Parcells disciples. First, you build offensive and defensive lines. Draft Membu at 7. I guess that's the guy who had the crazy combine. Again, if they did, I wouldn't mind. Now, I'm saying that without watching one snap of him, so I don't know. But I wouldn't be mad at them drafting a tackle. I just wouldn't. Tony, the GM, says 12% of quarterbacks taking the second, and 4% of the third round and later QBs come second contract starters. Wait till 26. Lots of QBs drafts. I'm okay with them waiting until 2026 if they don't have any conviction in the guys this year. But you cannot just say that the next year's class is automatically going to be better. Again, because last year, people at this time were saying, hey, look at Beck, look at Drew Allar, look at Quinn Ewers. They're all going to be first round guys. And now you're talking about 4th, 5th round picks. Beck went back to school. Allar went back to school because it wasn't get drafted as highly. So, the 3rd, 4th, 5th guy, 2nd guy that you like this year could be a 5th round pick at this time next year. So you really don't know. So if the reason is, oh, well, we like Ward, but next year's class is better, that's foolish. If your thinking is, oh, well, I don't like Ward or Sanders at all, we'll take our shot and hope that next year's class is better. Fine. If you could understand the different lines of thinking, so I'm not just going to rely on next year being a better quarterback class.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Kev Chada says, do you believe focusing on RAS and late round picks like JD did is not the best factor? For me, I'm okay. I tend to lean towards players who have had injuries and you're hoping that the injury problems can get better, or high RAS guys because you can develop them into something. I don't love just taking a really subpar athlete who's just good at football in the later rounds because they're not going to probably make an impact, but just get the best player available. I don't think it's a big deal either way. And really, you look at his drafts, and we can kill Joe Douglas for a lot of things, but can we also acknowledge that he got Michael Carter later in the draft? He got Brandon Eccles later in the draft, who's pretty solid. He's got some guys later in the draft that are actually relatively successful. So it's not like Joe Douglas never hit in late rounds. If you hit on a guy every other year in rounds 5, 6, or 7, it's a pretty good drafter, really. So I don't think Joe Douglas did terrible in the later rounds. I could be misremembering, but Eccles, Michael Carter, I'm sure there's some other ones. Sherwood was a 5th round pick, and he might get $10, $12 million a year. So was he really that awful at drafting guys late? I don't think so.
I think the recent ones were weaker. 23, I just pulled up 23. You had Warren,
Izzy, Barnes, JBC, and Kuntz. So pretty much all those are misses, except JBC is TBD. But we'll see. And then 2022, you had Ruckert, Mitchell, Clemens, and that's third and fourth round, so relatively higher. So yeah, early on, like there was some promise. Like you mentioned, a lot of good ones. I think it feels like the first two, some of those later picks were better. Then he nailed the top of the draft with 22. And then next two first round picks, not bad. Olu looks like he could be really good. McDonald, one-dimensional, but solid so far after last year. But the late round picks the last 2 years, definitely questionable. We'll see how 24 turns out, but obviously at this point, evaluating Douglas doesn't matter. But yeah.
One of our own, Stefan says, just signed DJ Jones or Tier Tart. Do you have any preferences at D tackle for the Jets? Because regardless if they get one in the draft or two in the draft, they need three, right? Like I would be okay with Solomon Thomas as a backup again, or maybe even Leonard Taylor. Maybe those two guys compete for like a third or fourth spot. But I think they need to, at the minimum, at least bring in one defensive tackle. So what do you think in terms of their defensive tackles? There's anybody in free agency that you would? I know they who's the guy from the Lions that people have been linking to them? There's Kaminsky, who's a D end, but there's also a D tackle that people have been linking to the Jets from the Lions, but I forget their names. What do the Jets do at D tackle in free agency?
Yeah, I really like Jones. I remember wanting them to target him back when he signed with Denver a few years ago, coming out of San Francisco. I like him because he's a run stuff first player, but it's not with total, sacrificing of the pass game. Sometimes you have these run stuffing types who are really good in that phase, but they do nothing in the passing game. And, it makes them like, I think Leaky Fotu kind of fit into that, although his run defense arguably wasn't even good, but just that type of mold where, okay, they're big and they can hold their ground, stop the run, but most of the time teams are going to pass and they're just going to do nothing. I like Jones because he is a good run stuffer, but he's also a respectable pass rusher. He'll probably still get a pretty high level deal. He was getting $10 million a year in his last deal. He's 30 now, but he's still a productive player. So maybe he'll be those high single digits. But I think that's worthwhile as one of the Jets' biggest signings, if not their biggest in this period defensively. Because like you said, they have nothing at D tackle after Q. No disrespect to Leonard Taylor, but they need three more guys at D tackle. And Jones is, like you said earlier, Q's at 3 tech. You would like someone who could play some 1 and 0, stop the run, be a compliment to him. And I think Jones could do that. Then you have BJ Hill, who I think is a similar player coming from Cincinnati.
You liked him a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, him too. Like both of those guys are, very solid two-way players, with some lean towards the run game, which I think the Jets really need next to Quinnen Williams because, last few years, they're just relying on Quinnen to carry the run defense because they kept signing these explosive pass rush first D tackles who just are exploding off the ball and they're not holding their ground. And it just put all the pressure on Quinnen Williams to carry that interior, or else teams are just going right up the gut on the Jets. So new scheme, different philosophy. I think they're going to value balance at that position a little bit more. So BJ Hill and DJ Jones are two really promising targets for me.
Yeah, and then there's the guy again. I don't know the analytics or anything like that, or actually how well he played. But the Levi Unwarziki, whatever the hell his name is. Linking him a little bit to the Jets just because of obviously the connection. It's like I've seen some crazy stuff on Twitter, Nania, where it's like the Jets are linked to this former Lions player. Like, oh my God, can you believe it? It's like, no shit. It's like that's all they're doing, just seeing the players who are afraid and the teams they came from. Like, what are we doing here? Nonetheless,
well, it's just everything gets reframed as a report. Like one writer at NFL.com or ESPN could make a prediction or something, which isn't their fault. They're within their right to do that. But then the other sites kind of reframe it as the Jets being interested or linked to, but it's not actually anything. But the player, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm not going to butcher last names like this that I don't get, but Levi from the Lions. I remember looking into him. He was a second round pick. He missed his whole second season with the back injury. He wasn't very productive first couple of years, but they had all those injuries this year. He played more, and he had a much improved season for them. And he kind of has that. He's in that tweener frame. He's 290. He's like that JFM type mold. He could play inside, give you some edge reps. So if they're looking for that type of guy, because he played that role for Detroit, Kaminsky did that for Detroit. If that's something that they want, he's a good fit for that. More so than being like the Jones Hill type, who are more pure one tech type of guys. But yeah, he's interesting as well.
So I try to look this up as because I see this question. Browns are in cap hell. Would you trade for Conklin? I think he's been okay for the last couple of years with the Browns. I'm not exactly sure how good he's been. And I'm trying to look up his contract number. So in 2025, he has a base. So in 2025 and 2026, he has a base salary of $14 million with cap hits of 17 and 18. So I guess like the bonuses and whatever, maybe they stick with the Browns. So again, I suck with contracts, but assuming Jack Conklin is basically on a 2-year, $28 million deal, would you consider Conklin for $14 million a year? Or maybe is that a little bit too much for a guy who is probably 30, how old is he? 31, 32 right now or something like that. So
he's 30. Just pulled it up.
Okay. So he's 30. So, would you be willing to maybe ship out a 5th round pick for Jack Conklin?
He definitely has that injury concern to him. He's had a couple lost seasons past year. I'm not totally up to date on how good he still is. I just know he, in his prime was really solid. I don't know. It does feel like at this point, is he giving you much more than a Moses? I don't know. But if he is an upgrade, potentially. But I'm not appealed to that route of just stay cheap with Moses and then rely on your front office to get value later in the draft here, because there's already so much invested in this O-line. You have 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick. We'll see what happens with Simpson. I hope he's another good year and they sign him long-term. But it would be nice to fill at least one of those spots with, okay, we hit on our 4th-round pick, our diamond in the rough guy. We got 3-4 years of him at $1 million a year. So it would be nice if they could knock that down. And in the meantime, have Moses there to hold it down. I think that's the right tackle plan. But an outside the box option like Conklin is worth considering if you can, feel confident about him being an upgrade over Moses in that stopgap role.
Couchada says, do you think it's a mistake to cut quarterback Travis without seeing him play healthy? Not necessarily. Like, he's a 5th-round pick. He's a 5th-round pick, right? Or 4th, or maybe late 4th. I always forget. But I don't think it's wise for him and his agent to come out and criticize the Jets and how they handled his medical situation last year. Now, obviously, the coaches are gone, but the medical staff is still there. And if anything, like, to my remembrance, weren't they like promoting Travis like in the offseason, like, oh, Travis is going to be healthy enough for the end of training camp and all this stuff? So weren't they kind of pushing that? And then they said that the Jets rushed him back. So I don't think it's the smartest move by Jordan Travis's camp to kind of criticize the Jets. But for a 5th-round pick, like, would I rather see him get a shot than just be cut? Yeah, sure. But do I think it's necessarily a mistake? Not necessarily. Like, 5th-round picks, 4th-round picks get cut all the time at quarterback. So while I would like to see it, I don't think it's a huge mistake necessarily.
No, I agree with you. And with the new regime, I'd wonder if maybe they just are planning to cut him anyway and draft their own developmental guy. Like we talked about, they could use a day 3 pick on a quarterback, at which point you already have Taylor, you're probably signing another guy in free agency. Travis is probably the odd man out anyway. So I'm curious to see how that pans out. But I know you talked about Fields a little bit. I don't think I added my 2 cents on that. But is he your top quarterback for free agent in terms of free agent targets? What do you think of him going into this season in terms of his upside, where he kind of ranks? And I think this would be my main question. Would you sign Fields and say he's the starter? Would you have him compete with Tyrod? How would you approach all of that?
Yeah, I said if they don't get a guy in the draft, or they don't see a plausible situation where they draft a quarterback in this draft, I think Fields is the guy you go to, just because there is some physical upside there. I would try to elevate, like, me personally, if you're gonna go with Fields, then like go full bore with Fields and see, what happens with him. I don't necessarily want him to like compete and not think he has a job, because isn't apparently some of like Fields' concern, or what he's going to consider when he signs somewhere, is if he's going to be the starter or not. So I don't think he'd even sign here if we told him he's going to compete with Tyrod. And realistically, like, yeah, Tyrod may even be a better quarterback at this point, but I'd rather take a shot on Fields before turning to Tyrod. So I'm okay with signing Fields and then giving him the starter's role, and then seeing where he ends up. Because again, like, look at Geno Smith, look at Sam Darnold, look at some of the guys who've turned it around. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with him, but there's at least a 5, 10%, 15% chance it can happen. So surround him with with good blocking tight ends, right, a good running game, and see where it goes from there. Obviously, there's physical upside there. He can run the ball. He has a really good arm. He just takes unnecessary sacks, unnecessary turnovers, holds the ball for too long, things like that. But I would take the shot. Now, like, ceiling, it's hard to tell, obviously. Like, Geno Smith and Sam Darnold took quite a while, but could he be a guy who's, a 15 to 20 best quarterback in the NFL if he starts to kind of put things together? There's obviously a possibility of it. Again, I'm not saying it's a high percentage chance, but it exists. And again, it does not exist with a Kirk Cousins or anything like that. So if they're not going to draft the guy in the first or second round, to me, get Fields and give him the starting job and see where we go, So Stefan says Beecham gang shouldn't have let him walk, then shouldn't have let Moses walk. Well, yeah. Like, hey, at first when they let Beecham walk, I'm like, hey, he's not a bad tackle. So they should retain him. Same thing with Morgan Moses a few years ago, but I'm obviously okay with Fashanu over Beecham now. But in terms of Morgan Moses, I'm with Nania. Even over Conklin, like, how much better is Conklin at $14 million than Moses would be at? What does he go for this year? $6, $7, $8 million. Like, I'm not sure that the drop off is so much there. Yeah, and Moses is a great leader in the locker room. So all about Moses and a late round guy, or even bring in Moses and Jedrick Wills. How much would Wills cost at this point? Sign him to a 2-year, $10 million contract and see what works out with him. If it works out with him, like, I'm okay with an expensive swing tackle as a backup, because without Tyron Smith and obviously Fashanu being the backup swing tackle, signing one in Wills, I don't think it's a bad swing tackle kind of role for him, and see where it goes. So Tyson says, I'm so done with dumb picks. Dumb 7 picks are going to wait till next Thursday. Yeah, you wanted to wait until free agency to see. And before we jump off, Nadia, which is almost 6:00, I'm going to run through the rest of the chat, and I do want to go through free agency a little bit and just see kind of what we like. Particularly, I want to look through receivers a little bit. Receivers and safeties, right? That's probably the spots people are looking at the most right now, because the Jets need a ton. Actually, we'll look at a few spots. We'll look at receiver, tight end, and maybe safety, because we need obviously a receiver as well. But let's see. Douglas' best trait was day 3 UDFAs and waivers. Yeah, no doubt. That and trades, right? Were his best bet. Again, JFM obviously being a waiver wire guy, and Quincy and Huff and Michael Carter and Brandon Eccles and quite a few guys. So Tyson says stupid because Cam Ward was a third round pick before he stayed in school. So last year he was the 85th pick, I guess. And this year people want to trade. That makes no sense. Well, realistically, if you look at most of the quarterbacks who are drafted in the first round, the year prior, they're probably not first round picks, right? Like, would Patrick Mahomes be a first round pick if he came out a year earlier? Probably not. Would a lot of guys. So there's plenty of guys. Would Jalen Hurts be a second round pick if he didn't transfer from did he transfer from Bama to Oklahoma, right? Like, if he didn't transfer, he would have been a 4th or a 5th round pick. Like, I think you can kind of say that with almost every single quarterback in every single year. So I don't necessarily think that's the most valid argument, right? Because most guys, if they're first round picks, would just come out. So most guys wait next year, build up their stock, and then go in the draft. So nonetheless, Levi, Onwuzurike. Onwuzurike. I don't know. Project Prospects with Dom C. What is up, Dom? Puna Ford.
That's a good attempt. Probably better than mine was going to be.
Onwuzurike. Onwuzukari, whatever. 350-pound fatty at D tackle needed, no doubt. Oh, there you go. It's pronounced Hanzarike. Hanzarike. Thank you, Hanzarike. I guess we'll take that. 55.
Hanzarike.
35 games in 4 years, and isn't that good anymore? That there are better options than Conklin. Yeah, give me Morgan Moses. That's the one. T. Rivera says, would you guys consider Trey Hendrickson, or is it better going to the draft for edge and D line? And if that's the case, how do you balance both free agency and the draft as far as us competing this year? A loaded question. Do I go for a guy in Trey? Like, if I'm a team who's a D end away from making a run, then yes, you go for Trey Hendrickson. Would he make an impact on the Jets and start this year? Yes, but what's the value? Like, I'd rather get a young guy who can develop into a starter. So I would say no to Trey Hendrickson for the price. And then in terms of how do we balance both free agency and the draft as far as competing this year, to me, I like and in terms of competing, I think they want to compete. I don't think the Jets are just going to push all their assets into next year. Glenn has told these guys in conversations with them personally that they expect to compete this year. So I don't think they're going to push it off, because then he'd be seemingly disingenuous to the team. So I think they push their chips in without being too reckless. To me, like, I think you take advantage of some of the markets. The safety market's very good this year, so maybe sign 2 safeties. And then it's really about like filling gaps to me this year. Like, I don't want to go for any big ticket items. I want to get a bunch of average guys and just fill all the holes. And then you let the draft fall to you, based on the strengths. But I don't want to be like, oh shit, we don't have a receiver at all because we didn't bring in Darius Slayton or whatever. So we have to draft a receiver in the top 3 rounds, something like that. So to me, it's about taking advantage of the market. And with that being said, filling holes with, average-ish players and not being splashy. But at the same time, not necessarily just pushing a ton of assets into next year, because then again, Glenn would be disingenuous.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the approach is going to be economical in that they're not going to bypass this offseason. They're not tanking. They're not rebuilding. I don't think those terms apply, but they're also not going all in to the point that they did the last 2 years, or even when they had some of their bigger spending sprees, like in 2019, 2022. It's going to be about, in terms of competing this year, I think it's going to be about how do you supplement the core pieces you already have, because obviously this isn't one of the best rosters in the league, but they do have a lot of players at many different positions who can be among the best at their respective spots, whether it's, Quinn Williams, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. They have a lot of pieces like this at the core. It's just about filling out the supporting cast around them. So I think it's going to be a matter of how can we economically use the cap space and the resources to put these guys in a better position to become the best versions of themselves. Because I think we could all agree none of those guys I just mentioned were the best versions of themselves last year and can perform better than they did. And I think getting them to that level comes down to, can you get some depth at receiver to, even if you don't have another superstar, take some pressure off of Garrett Wilson? Can you get some blocking at tight end so Breece Hall has, at least enough, holes to be fully evaluated so we can see what he's made of? Can you get some run defense around Q? And like we were talking about earlier on, can you get a corner opposite Sauce to keep him in that position where he can make a greater impact because teams can't just attack the other corner? Things like that. I think that's what it's going to be about, is crafting a well-rounded roster and finding ways to get value on the dollar by looking for scheme fits, looking for guys who are undervalued for whatever reason, things like that. I think that's going to be the goal this offseason, and that's how you can compete this year, even if it doesn't look like you're going all out with the spending.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way to answer that. Danger Zone says, do you think a new regime is at a disadvantage in their inaugural draft, considering they weren't in place for the whole year along with their scouts, etc.? Why I want to slide or go high floor and Warren? Yeah, I would say like, having your guys around, like they know how you operate. There's less there's less of that period where they're getting used to each other and all that stuff. So yeah, I think they're definitely at a disadvantage. Like, hey guys, nice to meet you. Okay, like let's kind of figure out our draft strategy. Whereas, you skip all the other bullshit if you guys already know each other. So they're definitely at a disadvantageous position with just coming in and meeting these guys. And that's why you want to slide. Yeah, to me, sliding down is the best option in this draft, unless they want to get a quarterback, or going with a high floor. To be honest, like I don't think Warren has the highest floor in the world. I think he could be a very good. I think he's a high ceiling. I think the highest floor type of guy is probably Mason Graham. I think Warren's the higher ceiling type of player. I don't think he's like a lock to be like at least a solid player though. I think there's a floor there, but like I said, I think he has a physical upside. I think he has a blocking ability, even though it may be overrated. He has the want to, and obviously he can improve technically. And he has some really good physical upside from speed, the way he could break down for his size, the contested catch ability, the yak ability. I like Warren quite a bit, at least relative to this draft, So let's see. Tony Alexio says replace Greg the broken leg. They're at 52 million right now, and they can get up to 58 if they cut him, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's around there. Yeah.
Yeah, so about $58 million. And then let's go into here. I'll share my screen really quickly, add to stage. Okay, so we kind of looked at D tackle. Some other spots I want to look at just quickly. I know we're almost at 2 hours already right now, but wide receiver. So for me personally, and obviously we can't just sign everybody that we say, but to me, again, I'm not looking to make splashes, obviously, with like Diggs, Allen, Cooper, Godwin, and even I would argue don't splash with Diggs, Allen, or Cooper, maybe not even Cooper at this point. Yeah. To me, I'm in the camp of like, hey, and this has been pretty much kind of consensus. To me, bring in like Darius Slayton, a guy who I think's been at least decent with a really bad quarterback situation. Bring in him and like Tim Patrick or Josh Palmer. Like that's kind of where I'm at. If you told me, hey, the Jets walked away from free agency with Slayton and Palmer as your again, not a great 2 and a 3, but I'd at least feel okay about it. Where right now I'm like a panic state about the receiver 2, 3, 4 of the Jets. And, whether it be like, obviously, seeing Palmer and Slayton is kind of the hope. Maybe one of those guys is instead replaced by Tim Patrick. But I think like out of those 3 guys, like at least give me like 2 of those 3. I would say that's kind of where I fall.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think I really like Patrick and what he did coming back for the Lions last year. Josh Reynolds is a good downfield threat. And you mentioned Slayton as well. I feel like he always steps up. Has never been a good situation for him there, but I think that's the goal. Find guys who can thrive in their roles. You know what they do well. We're going to focus on using them at those specific things, and they're going to make the most out of the 40 to 50 targets they get. That's what I think you want out of these signings, because like I just did an article about this, but you look at the way the Lions offense was built. They had an elite receiver 1 who attracted a lot of targets, which we know Garrett can do, and he can make more of them, as you talked about, but he's capable of taking that many targets. They had high level tight end 1. They used the running backs a lot. So the receivers beyond Amon-Ra St. Brown weren't super heavily utilized, but what they did was they maximized the targets they got. So they weren't getting targeted frequently, but they would catch 70% of the targets and get, 3-4 touchdowns, without getting a high target total. So I think that's what you want out of this receiver unit. The Jets aren't getting another superstar this year unless they draft, McMillan at 7. He's potential and all that. Unless you do that, it's going to be these mid-tier guys. So find players who are solid, round out the depth chart, can thrive in their roles on, valuable contracts. I think that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and then in terms of moving to another position of obviously massive need for the Jets, like this is like receiver, you got to bring in at least 1 or 2 guys. Tight end is another spot you got to bring in at least 1 or 2 guys. I'm personally in the camp of, hey, let's bring back Conklin. I like him. I think he's a top half of the league tight end in terms of receiving. That's fine. Not a guy you're going to write home about, but at least a decent starter. But there's been a little bit of rumors between the Jets and Juwan Johnson. Again, buy into what you want to, but it is smokescreen season. You wrote an article about Mo Alley Cox, I believe. So what would you be looking to do? And like, to me, like, listen, like, hey, if you can get Conklin for $6 million a year and Juwan Johnson for 5 or 6, fine. It doesn't prohibit you from drafting a guy in the second, third round, even in the first round. Like, I to me, bring in 2 guys. Now I think Mo Alley Cox is good for as a blocker, right? Too. So like, to me, bring in one of Conklin or Juwan Johnson as like your receiving threat, and then bring in like Mo Alley Cox as your blocker. So another spot where I'd bring in 2 guys again, and that probably costs you, if you're bringing in Juwan Johnson and Mo Alley Cox, probably combined $10 million. And it really leaves you in a spot where you can be flexible, because if Mo Alley Cox was signed to be tight end 2, and then you draft Warren, people are gonna be like, oh my God, but you paid Mo Alley Cox $4 or $5 million. Like, it allows you some flexibility so you can take advantage of a strong tight end draft class.
Yeah, exactly. And I really want to see them take advantage of like that blocking tight end tier, whether it's Alley Cox, Chris Manhertz is another one I brought up. A guy like that where you're paying, dirt cheap money for a guy who's not going to catch many passes, if any, but he's going to come on the field and he's going to carve holes in the run game. It's going to be important for this team if they're going to run a lot of 12 personnel. The Lions also like to run towards the tight ends when they do it, so they had to be able to get out in front and throw lead blocks. So it's really important, and it's something the Jets haven't had in a while. It was a big weakness last year. Like, Jeremy Rucker could be a good player if he was just a good blocker, regardless of his receiving, but he's not.
Yeah.
So I really want to see them get some value, like spend $2 million on Mo Alley Cox. That could change your offense, or like make a big impact relative to that money you're spending. And then, like you said, I'm down for Conklin. I wrote about Ingram earlier. I think that is a, good hold the fort down type signing, a guy who is good in the underneath passing game. I think he complements what the Lions type offense looks like. Juwan Johnson too. So yeah, I say get a blocking tight end for cheap, get one of these solid receivers to hold it down. And then it's a deep tight end class. Even if you don't get Warren, it's considered to be deep into those first 3 rounds. So they really have an opportunity to overhaul this whole unit, and they have to. Like, I don't want to see that 2021 situation where we knew the Jets brought in Mike LaFleur. We're going to try to run the Niners offense. Let's go Tyler Kroft and Ryan Griffin. So let's try to avoid that situation.
Now, moving on to, let's see. So we talk about the defensive line and all that stuff. Probably the next spot where it's like, hey, what are we going to do? Especially specifically if Sherwood leaves. Is there anybody at linebacker? Maybe I should like limit it down to inside linebacker, because I think those are more the stand-up backers, at least in this system. So Sherwood signs elsewhere. He signs with the Falcons, a 4-year, $48 million deal, $30 million guaranteed. He's gone. He's with Ulrich now. The Jets have absolutely nothing but Barnes behind Quincy Williams. He needs a running mate. So is there anybody that you've that's piqued your interest in terms of linebackers that the Jets could bring in? I know that guy. There was a linebacker from the Lions who's going to be a free agent, but he's more of like a special teams guy. So maybe him. I don't know if you've done any research on him or any of these other linebackers, but backup options for Sherwood, because if he leaves, they're going to need a guy.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think this is probably the last one I'm going to get to, some last minute research before it all goes down on Monday. But what do you think in terms of bringing back Sherwood? Are you pro that? I know Robbie was talking about maybe you don't want to have 2 lighter linebackers in the scheme, who are kind of aggressive, over pursue, not as gap disciplined maybe. Are you in favor of re-signing him? And would you do that 12 number?
Yeah, I think I would do the 12. Like, the thing is, like, and obviously that's a good point. Like, do you prefer a heavier guy, more of a thumper, and a guy who's going to be lighter, more of your range guy? Yeah, sure. But like, beggars can't be choosers, right? Like, if you had a better option than Sherwood, then fine. But I don't see some guy who's going to be a thicker linebacker who could squeeze runs and all that stuff in free agency who I really like. So I don't want to just lose out on talent because he doesn't fit it the best. Like, I would prefer to sign Sherwood, while also acknowledging it may not be the best fit because there's two rangy guys. But Sherwood also gives you the flexibility to say that, hey, if Quincy wants a little bit too much money, we have a backup option. Whereas if you bring in, let's say, I don't know, Eric Kendricks for a year, and then Quincy leaves because he wants too much money. Now you're sitting there with empty hands in 2026. So I would personally like to bring back Sherwood.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with you, honestly, because I think he's a good tackler and he's disciplined, even if he's not the a bigger type. I think he's pretty reliable in terms of finishing his tackles. And between the two of them, it's just, I think, an advantage to have so much range between your two linebackers. And there are downsides that come with the collective size between them, but I think it's a good place to be when you have that type of range at your linebacker.
Yeah, again,
spot.
in a perfect world, like, yeah, you could get a guy who's thicker, but I don't really see a guy out there who's to Sherwood's level. You could just say, oh, well, he's going to be, just as good and just a different type of guy. But this is another spot. It's probably one of the last spots we'll hit because it's a little bit over time. But this is a place where, hey, if you're the Jets, take advantage and even bring in two safeties, because I'm not going to say I've done research on all these guys, but Justin Reed's been a solid guy his entire career. Justin Simmons, I know, is older, but has had good years with the Falcons. Rayshawn Jenkins is a guy who I know has been at least decent with the Seahawks. Like Xavier Woods, Chin, Blackman, like Quandre Diggs. Well, I know he dropped off, quite a bit. Javon Holland. Like, there is a lot of guys in free agency at safety with at least like interesting upside. So safety is another spot where, hey, at least to bring in one safety. I'm not saying definitely bring in two, but to me, bring in, hey, Justin Reed and Tony Adams back as a a 3 or a 4. Like, that's kind of my plan for safety.
Yeah, I think if there's a spot to splash, it's probably here, because it's really deep. It's one of the deeper positions in free agency, and the Jets have no starters on the team. So yeah, this is by all means a spot to go out. And if you're going to get, if there's one splash that you could fit into your budget, I think this is a spot to do it. Is there anything in particular skill wise you're looking at this position related to the scheme?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what the scheme is going to be, right? Because, like, is it going to be more Wilkes? Is it going to be more Glenn? I don't have the numbers or like the charting of exactly what they run, and because I know Wilkes is more man, right, and Glenn is more zone, at least to my remembrance. Like, what exactly are they going to do?
Wilkes,
Vice versa. Okay,
Wilkes the zone guy.
Yeah, Wilkes zone guy, and Glenn with the man. So I don't know what they're going to run. So I haven't looked into the defense enough I don't want to just be like, oh yeah, well, because of this, I don't really know. I personally, in today's NFL, you want guys who are really mostly interchangeable. Like, I feel like we're kind of away with the years of the Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor type vibes. Like, these guys have to really interchange a lot. So you do want some level of versatility with these guys, but it would be disingenuous for me to say, oh, because of this defense, they should bring in these two type of guys, because I don't really know. But it does seem like a relatively, deep kind of safety class. So I would bring in at least one resign. Even if they brought in Justin Reed, Tony Adams for $2-3 million, and even what's his face, who was the backup there, Jalen Mills, like your 4. Okay, like I'm okay with that. Next is a huge one, because they don't have Greg Zerl anymore. Who is the Jets kicker going to be in 2026, Nadia?
So good question. Obviously a lot of drama surrounding it last year. I'm not really. Some people talk about the draft. I don't know if I'm a fan of using draft picks on kickers, because I don't feel like it doesn't have the hit rate that it should, when there are so many good undrafted ones, or you could just get a veteran who kind of know what you're getting. I guess you never really do, but it didn't feel like something that Douglas emphasized too heavily, and they paid the price for that. So I would like to see them go after one of the free agents. I mean, Nick Folk he's 40 years old, but he's still one of the best out there. He's available. Eddie Pinheiro, another former Jet, lacks distance, but he's pretty reliable short. Badgley, Joey Sly, Matt Prater. It's not the greatest class, honestly, outside of Folk, but I'm curious to see how they handle it. I just would like to see some sort of, emphasis rather than just we'll take what we can get.
Yeah, strictly for vibes. I think you bring back the folk hero. That's my point. Now, is there, and before I'm going to lightning around the next couple of questions because I am being summoned. Is there a free agency kind of dark horse guy that like you're all about, who you've done your research on? Like, hey, I really like this guy at this spot, or have we kind of hit on all the points of the free agents we're kind of looking at?
I think Palmer, DJ Jones, those are two guys that come to mind first. I would put them up there.
Now, and I'm excited for Monday. I guess it starts at 12. The legal tampering makes no sense. Just make it freaking Monday and make it 2 days earlier. I don't understand this whole thing. But I'll answer some of these questions lightning round. Joseph Patterson says, I guess my point is it's hard to evaluate our receivers since A-Rod didn't really throw to them. Conklin. Yeah, it's like, and I said this before, Joe, it's I don't when I evaluate guys, I don't just look at targets. I watch every single rep of their entire season. So it's easier for me than maybe it is for other people who just watch the games or just the targets or whatever, because I evaluate him on every single rep. How is he getting open? Is he getting open? How is he doing contested catches? So if you watch every single rep, it gets a little bit easier. Noah Fant may be a cap casualty or could do a late trade like the Texans. The thing with like Fant and Ingram is they're not really blockers, right? Like they're more receiving tight ends. So while they fit the underneath game, do they fit the blocking type role that they may want in that offense? That's the only thing. But yeah, like, hey, if Noah Fant's our tight end too, like I can't be mad at it, Ian says, what's the plan at D tackle besides Q? Not much. Taylor. Yeah, I think Taylor could be your D tackle 4. And then I think like Nani said, like you bring in the, Levi, or you bring in DJ Jones or BJ Hill. Like there's a few guys there. So to me, you get at least a guy in free agency. You have Taylor as D tackle 4, and then you get another guy in the draft. So I would say sign one, draft one. I wouldn't be mad at, sign 2, draft 1, or draft 2, sign 1. Like just bring in at least 2 or 3 D tackles this year. Tony Alexio says, are there any comp picks for Sherwood or Conklin? You could get comp picks depending on their contracts based or versus who we signed this year. But because the Jets do have $40 or $58 million in cap, assuming they cut Greg Zuerlein, I would say that they're probably not going to get comp picks for Sherwood or Conklin if they do leave. Nani, do you disagree with that, or?
No, I think it'll probably get canceled out just because the quantity is going to be there. I think they're going to have a quantity free agents.
Yeah, exactly. Stefan says, bring back Sherwood, but Tyrell Dotson is a good option. Devin Bush or Robert Spillane aren't bad either. I haven't done enough research into those guys, but because you're a Jets X Factor writer, I will believe you. And I will also say that those guys are good. Solzy, I'm late. How many times did the chat demanded Fields? Solzy, honestly, I would say the chat has been more against Fields than for Fields in this stream, at least. But again, if you're not drafting a guy,
a little anti-Fields.
Yeah, at least he has upside. Like I'm taking Fields over the Cars of the world, in my opinion. The Kirk Cousins, those guys, I just don't care about those guys. Can we just roll with Tyrod and keep the powder dry for 2026, please? I don't think that's the worst option in the world if Fields is going to demand a lot of money, but I would be okay with $10 million to take a shot on Fields. Nadia, anything else you want to speak about before we jump off? And I appreciate the somewhat impromptu appearance from you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I guess quickly on that last point, I'm not the biggest Fields guy either. I honestly don't think he's ever going to make that leap, to be frank, but I think he's one of the top 20 to 25 quarterbacks in the league, and he's young enough to have the chance to potentially do that. So for those reasons, given the Jets' options or lack thereof at quarterback this offseason, I think I'm down as long as the price is fair. $10 million a year for a year or 2 years, I'm okay with that. Yeah. If it goes to that 15 I've seen thrown around, not at that point I get a little hesitant, but all things considered, I think it's probably my favorite option. Doesn't mean I love it or I'm gonna buy his jersey or anything. I don't think I'm buying anyone's jersey ever again, actually, but from China. But yeah, I'm down for Fields.
I just, like I said, I just cleaned out my house and stuff, and I had to go through my closet and like get rid of a lot of stuff and do whatever else, just being prepared to move. And the amount of Jets jerseys I donated. Now maybe I could have just like replaced the nameplate, but my God, like going through the Le'Veon Bells and Elijah Moores and all these other guys and Sam and Zach and God, I don't know. I dressed like a small village with all the Jets jerseys I had that I gave away. But yeah, I appreciate you guys again. I'm sorry for being an extra week late. I said bi-weekly, and I missed 3 weeks. Just a crazy few weeks for me. I will be back next weekend, whether that be with Nani or not. It's probably Saturday again, just talking about what the Jets did in the first few days of free agency. So definitely look out for that. I'm preparing plenty of reviews behind the scenes. Nani, before we jump off, is there any article? I know you just said you're working on, I think, the linebacker article, or you're going to be working on a linebacker article, but is there anything else that just came out or is about to come out that you want to throw out there?
No, nothing in particular. I've just been kind of rattling off articles on whatever topic is kind of hot out there or whatever comes to my mind. It hasn't been very like kind of rigid in terms of a series or anything. I'm just kind of riding the wave of what people seem to want to read about. That's why I just did the Engram thing earlier. So I would just say stay tuned, and I'm going to be whatever's out there. I probably am going to be covering it, try to give some more detail to it.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. We appreciate it.